Notgeld, a German word which is simply defined as emergency money. Though first issued in the beginning of World War I in Germany, the Notgeld that are much more relatively known are the ones issued during the Weimar Republic in the early 1920s. Issued as a result of a lack of small change in World War I due to a necessity to use metals for the war effort, most Notgeld lost its relevance in terms of purchasing power as a result of a small face value accompanied by the sudden inflation of the German paper mark. This makes one ask, why were most Notgeld issued with such a low face value in a time where the official paper mark notes were being issued in higher denominations? To answer, we must look into the different types of Notgeld which were issued. These can be divided into two groups, which included Notgeld printed for the purpose of financing and Notgeld printed to supplement the lack of value in the paper mark. To simplify things, they are A and B respectively. To begin with, it is important to note that not all Notgeld had similar levels of design. As such, Type A and B Notgeld are usually identified based on their issue date and the exchange value of the mark against the US dollars. Different issuing authorities are likely to have different motivations for having different designs, varying between dull and creative. This isn't the only factor, as there are often tiny details which can often aid us in doing so. Without further delay, I present the first batch of Type A Notgeld. Type A Notgeld are categorized by a few factors, which are unlimited to relatively low face value in contrast to the paper mark exchange rate, being expired once issued, and exaggerated designs. Often, you will start to see that these kinds of Notgeld appear from 1922 onwards, as the exchange rate between the paper mark and the US dollar starts to worsen, where 1 US dollar was the equivalent to 191 marks and 81 Pfennig in January of 1922. At this point, it would have been quite pointless to issue Notgeld at denominations below 100 marks. But despite this, numerous issues still popped up, with denominations as low from 5 Pfennig to 1 mark still being issued. The answer to this is quite interesting. Depending on funding from the German Weimar government at this point was unreliable, as most cash was used to pay reparations for the Treaty of Versailles, and this greatly affected smaller governing authorities. So think small towns and small municipalities. In response, they issued Notgeld for the purpose of appealing to foreign collectors, which were a far more reliable source of income. As such, these notes were often sold past their expiry date, at low denominations and with exaggerated designs. A great example of this can be seen with the 25 Pfennig Reutergeld, which had not only been expired, but were made for the purpose of honoring Fritz Reuter, and in turn being suitable for sales to foreign collectors. It worked as intended, and it is often quite easy to find Notgeld outside of Germany, a sign that this strategy of printing beautiful notes with minuscule face values had financially saved these small governing entities. Type B Notgeld are usually identified by having denominations that are in sync with the exchange rate at the time of issue. As inflation spiraled unpredictably from 1922 onwards, the Reichsbank, which had been the main note-issuing authority of Weimar Germany, had lost much of its ability to meet cash needs. At this stage, it was more common to see towns, cities, and businesses issue their own Notgeld as a means of increasing the desperately needed supply of cash due to inflation. I should add that these types of Notgeld did exist prior to 1922. It was simply less common of an occurrence. Of course, with private entities and minor government entities issuing their own currency, there came limitations. Here with the 5 Pfennig issued in 1920 by the town of Brandenburg am Harz, we can see in the reverse a list of names. These names were local businesses or traders within that town which would have accepted this type of Notgeld. These limits did not exist for bigger authorities or companies, as seen in this 50 Pfennig note from the city of Oebisfeld-Kautendorf, the 2 million mark note from the city of Krefeld, and the 10 million mark note from the Electric Works Westfalen AG Bochum. These limits were non-existent, as they had the capital and credibility needed to back up such Notgeld, though of course they often had expiry dates, which were often announced in local newspapers or notices. At the same time, these sort of Notgeld had greater acceptance outside the regions they were issued, as it was assumed they had less volatility. Of course, as time went on, smaller denominations became irrelevant, as by August 1923, roughly 4.6 million marks were needed to get $1, and as such, it became essential to have Notgeld at denominations worth more than that of the current exchange rate, as even a 10 million mark note was only worth $2.1 at that point. In the end, it became quite pointless, as by the end of 1923, 4.2 trillion marks were needed to exchange $1. With the introduction of the Rentenmark in 1924 came the end of the papier mark and the Notgeld. Today you can find Type A and Type B Notgeld with quite an ease, though I must warn you that you should be prepared to pay slightly more for Type B Notgeld. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.